Food hedonics is really a catch-all term for the enjoyment that people get from food. But when we talk about food hedonics in our research and in a scientific capacity, what we really mean are the different components that make up the enjoyment of food, or how rewarding a food is. And we think that, and others think that food reward is made up of two main components. So the first is our liking for food, and this is related to the pleasantness of the taste of the food. But a second component, which we think is becoming increasingly important in our understanding of appetite, is our wanting for food. So this relates to the attractiveness of food, or our motivation to approach and consume a certain food. Well, I'm a psychologist by training, and over my career I've specialised more in the psychobiology of human motivation, so what motivates our behaviour. In particular, my interests are in what motivates our eating behaviour. So what really fascinates me is understanding why people make the food choices that they make, why people might make unhealthy or unwise food choices, and why it's so difficult for some people, but not all people, to control the amount of food that they eat. Our research aimed to investigate the effect of sweet-tasting food, and this is in comparison to bland-tasting and savoury-tasting food, on food intake, food choice, and appetite sensations. So we wanted to know if people were exposed to sweet-tasting food by consuming a small amount of sweet-tasting food, if this would stimulate or inhibit their appetite compared to savoury and bland-tasting food. Well, we found that after exposure to sweet food, some individuals actually exhibited an enhanced appetite response. So this was shown in that there was a weaker suppression of hunger over the next hour, and when they were given a meal to consume, they actually consumed more of that meal compared to when they had consumed a small amount of savoury or bland-tasting food. And we found that this effect seemed to be explained partly by the fact that there was an increase in their wanting for high-fat and high-sweet combination foods. So the effect of sweetness depends on which stage of satiety you're really thinking about and you're examining. So the early effects we know of sweetness are to increase our appetite through its hedonic value, or how pleasurable it is, encouraging us to eat more of the food. But later on, the effects of sweetness can actually become suppressive, can reduce our appetite. On the average, there doesn't seem to be any particular increase or decrease in appetite for sweet foods compared to savoury or bland foods. But that's across the average. That average actually is masking a huge variability in responses, with some people who do respond very strongly and increase their appetite when they're exposed to sweet foods, but other people who respond very weakly or don't respond at all. And what our research is interested in looking at is trying to understand who those individuals are that respond most strongly, and what it is about them. And if we can understand or identify those individuals, then we might be able to intervene or to tailor advice to help them make more appropriate food choices or control their food intake. We know that people like the taste of sweet food, and that's strongly related to the liking component of hedonics, but the wanting component could be more strongly associated with the caloric content of sweet food and the association we have for sweet foods to be high in energy. So low-calorie sweeteners, for example, might be an interesting case where liking and wanting responses to food might actually be separate from one another, or might dissociate from one another.